Today, I sent my family a bill for 8 years of disrespect, and they were shocked. They called me cruel, ungrateful, a monster who would abandon her own parents. But they don't know the truth. They don't know what I saw last night, the moment that finally shattered the illusion I had desperately clung to for my entire life. They don't know about the silence in the car, the weight of my sleeping children against my shoulders, or the cold, hard decision that formed in my heart. They only know that the money stopped. But it didn't start with money. It started in a warm kitchen that smelled of garlic and oregano, with a plate of spaghetti my children were never meant to have. The drive to my parents' house was routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I'd leave my job as a graphic designer, fight through rush hour traffic, and pick up my 2 boys, 7-year-old Noah and 5-year-old Leo. My sister Chloe did the same with her kids. It was our arrangement, a way for my mom Karen to see all her grandchildren. I used to think of it as a blessing, a loud, chaotic, but loving family hub. Now I see it for what it was, a stage for a quiet cruelty I had been too blind to notice. When I walked in through the back door, the house was strangely quiet. Usually I'd be hit by a wall of sound, the television blaring, the kids yelling. But tonight there was only the low murmur of conversation from the living room. I called out, "Mom, I'm here," but got no response. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I walked towards the kitchen, the heart of the home, and stopped dead in the doorway. The scene before me was so perfectly, horribly composed, it felt like a painting. At the big oak table, bathed in the warm light from the chandelier, sat my nephews Mason and Sophia. They were laughing, their faces smeared with tomato sauce, as my mom served them a second heaping portion of spaghetti and meatballs. The aroma was rich and comforting, a smell I associated with home, with love. But my eyes were not on them. They were drawn to the shadows near the pantry. There, on the cold linoleum floor, sat my sons, Noah and Leo. They weren't crying. They weren't complaining. They were just sitting there, shoulders slumped, in a silence that was far more heartbreaking than any tantrum. In their hands were slices of plain dry bread. Leo was picking at the crust, his small face a mask of resignation. Noah was staring at the floor, not eating, just holding the bread, as if he didn't know what to do with it. They were 5 feet away from the feast at the table, but they might as well have been in another country. My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't speak. It was as if my feet were glued to the floor. My mom finally noticed me. "Oh, Olivia, you're here," she said, her voice breezy, as if nothing was wrong. The kids were starving, so I let them eat first. My sister Chloe's voice drifted in from the living room. "Yeah, your kids already ate. Besides, mixed kids are easy, they'll eat anything." "You worry too much, Liv." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Mixed kids are easy. The casual cruelty, the dismissiveness, it wasn't new. I had heard variations of it for years, little comments I had always brushed off, always made excuses for. But seeing it, seeing the physical manifestation of that sentiment in the dry bread my sons were holding, was different. It was undeniable. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. A strange, cold calm washed over me. I walked past the table without looking at them, knelt on the floor, and gently took the bread from my sons' hands. Their eyes, wide and questioning, met mine. I gave them a small, reassuring smile, though my heart was breaking. "Come on, babies," I whispered. "Let's get you some real food." I went to the stove, took the pot of leftover spaghetti, and filled 2 bowls. My hands were steady, my movements were deliberate. I could feel my mother's and sister's eyes on my back, could sense their confusion. They expected a fight, an emotional outburst. They didn't know how to handle my silence. I placed the bowls on the floor in front of my sons, and they ate like they hadn't seen food all day. The silence in the kitchen was now heavy, accusatory. The laughter from the table had died. My nephews watched my sons eat with wide, curious eyes. It was in that moment, watching my beautiful boys devour their food on the floor like outcasts, that the final thread of denial inside me snapped. It wasn't about the food. It was about their place, and my family had made it painfully clear where they thought that place was. The silence in the car was a heavy blanket. In the rearview mirror, I could see the soft, innocent faces of my sons, both fast asleep in their car seats, their bellies finally full. The streetlights painted fleeting stripes of orange across their features as we drove further away from my parents' house, a place I had once called a second home. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. Every replay of the scene in the kitchen, the dry bread, the cold floor, sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. A part of me, the part that had been making excuses for my family for years, was desperately searching for an explanation, a misunderstanding. But the larger part of me, the mother in me, knew exactly what I had seen. It was a message loud and clear. That's when my phone buzzed the screen, lighting up the dark car with a name I didn't want to see, Chloe. For a moment, a foolish flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Maybe she was calling to apologize. Maybe my mother had explained how awful it looked, and this was her attempt to make things right. My hands trembled slightly as I pressed the button to answer, putting the call on the car's speaker system. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely a whisper, not wanting to wake the boys. "Are you insane?" Chloe's voice, sharp and laced with indignation, filled the car. There was no greeting, no concern, just pure, unfiltered anger. "You just picked up your kids and walked out." Without a single word. "Who do you think is going to clean up the dishes you left behind?" I was so stunned I couldn't speak. Dishes. She was calling me about dishes. The hope that had flickered just a second before was instantly extinguished, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "Chloe." I started trying to keep my voice even. "Did you really just call me to complain about dirty plates? Well, what else am I supposed to call you about?" She scoffed, and I could practically hear her rolling her eyes. "Mom said you're getting more and more sensitive ever since you married Liam. It was just spaghetti. It's not a big deal. You always get this worked up over nothing." Nothing. She called it nothing. The image of Noah staring at the floor of Leo, picking at the crust of his bread, flashed in my mind. The hollow look in their eyes. The shame. It wasn't nothing. It was everything. It was the sum of 1,000 tiny cuts, 1,000 dismissive comments, 1,000 moments where my children were treated as less than. And I had let it happen. I had stood by and made excuses, telling myself it was just how my family was. I took a deep breath, the air feeling thick and heavy in my lungs. "I'm not having this conversation with you right now, Chloe." "Fine, whatever," she said dismissively. The shift in her tone was immediate, moving on, as if the previous topic was a boring chore she had just completed. "Anyway, the real reason I was calling is because my car is making that weird noise again. The mechanic said it's the transmission this time. It's going to be a couple thousand to fix, and, I don't have that kind of money right now. Can you just ask Liam to transfer the money over? Just put it in our usual account. I need to get it fixed before Monday." And there it was. The final piece of the puzzle clicking into place, the casual disregard for my feelings, the complete dismissal of my children's humiliation, and then without missing a beat, the demand for money. It was never about family. It was never about love or support. It was a transaction. I was their safety net, their emergency fund, their solution. My role was to provide, and in return my children and I were expected to accept our place, to eat the scraps from the table and be grateful for it. In that moment, something inside me shifted permanently. The hurt and confusion hardened into a diamond-sharp resolve. I was done with the excuses, done with the disrespect, and done being their bank. I said nothing. "Liv, are you there?" Chloe's voice was impatient now. "Did you hear me? I said I need the money." I calmly reached over and ended the call, plunging the car back into silence. The decision was made. The war had been declared not by me, but for me. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to fight back. I carried the boys into the house one by one, their warm, limp bodies heavy in my arms. Noah mumbled something in his sleep as I tucked him into bed, his face peaceful under the soft glow of his dinosaur nightlight. A fierce, protective love swelled in my chest, so powerful it almost hurt to breathe. Down the hall, I laid Leo next to his brother, kissing his forehead and lingering for a moment, just watching them. They were my world, my everything. And tonight my family had shown them that they were worth less than a plate of pasta. Tonight, I had failed to protect them. The guilt was a physical weight settling deep in my gut. When I finally walked back into the living room, Liam was waiting for me. He was sitting on the couch, the television off a mug of tea steaming on the coffee table beside an untouched one he had made for me. He didn't have to ask what was wrong. My husband knew me better than anyone, and he had been warning me about this for years in his gentle, patient way. He had seen the subtle slights, the casual dismissiveness, the constant financial requests that were disguised as family emergencies. I was the one who had refused to see it. "Talk to me, Liv," he said softly, his eyes full of a sad understanding that made my own eyes burn with unshed tears. And so I did. The words tumbled out of me in a torrent of pain and anger. I described the scene in the kitchen in vivid detail, the warm light on my nephew's happy faces, the cold floor my own sons were forced to sit on. I told him about the dry bread, the silence, the hollow feeling of seeing my children treated like second-class citizens in their own grandparents' home. Then, my voice shaking with rage, I told him about Chloe's phone call. The entitlement, the anger over dirty dishes, the immediate shameless demand for money. Liam listened without interrupting. He just sat there, his gaze fixed on mine, his presence a solid grounding force in my chaotic swirl of emotions. He wasn't surprised. I could see it in his eyes. He was just heartbroken for me, for the pain he knew this revelation would cause. When I finally finished, the room was quiet, except for my ragged breathing. "I'm so sorry, honey," he said, his voice thick with empathy. He moved from his chair to sit beside me, wrapping his strong arms around me. I leaned into him, finally letting the tears I had been holding back fall freely. "I'm so sorry you had to see that. And I'm so sorry that for years I didn't push harder. I saw it happening, but I didn't want to be the husband who came between you and your family. It's not your fault," I sobbed into his shoulder. "It's mine. I let it happen. I made excuses for them. I kept telling myself that this was just how they were, that they loved us in their own way. But it's not love, is it? It's not love to make your grandchildren feel like they are less than. It's not love to treat your own daughter like an ATM." We sat in silence for a long time, my tears slowly subsiding into a quiet, simmering anger. The guilt was still there, a dull ache in my chest. Guilt for the years of blindness, for the money I had so freely given thinking I was helping, when I was only enabling their worst impulses. But a stronger feeling was beginning to take its place, a fierce, unyielding resolve. I pulled away and looked him in the eye. "I can't do it anymore, Liam. I can't pretend. I can't subject our boys to that. Ever again." He nodded, his expression serious. "I know. We won't. So what do we do now?" The question hung in the air, but the answer was already clear in my mind. It had been forming ever since Chloe had asked for the car money. We cut them off. I said the words tasting strange and final on my tongue. Completely. No more mortgage payments, no more car payments for Chloe. No more emergency money for whatever new crisis they invent. We stop. It all stops. Tonight. A part of me, the daughter who had been raised to always be responsible, to always put family first, screamed in protest. It felt like a betrayal, a cruel act. But then I saw my sons' faces in my mind sitting on that cold kitchen floor, and I knew this wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of protection. My loyalty wasn't to the people who shared my blood. My loyalty was to the two little boys sleeping down the hall, the ones who trusted me to keep them safe. Liam squeezed my hand. "Okay," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for doubt. "We do it together. No more. It stops tonight." And just like that, the plan was set. There was no more debate, no more hesitation. We were a team, a united front. My family had finally pushed me too far, and they were about to find out what happened when the ATM ran out of money. The decision once made settled into a heavy reality in the quiet of our home. After our conversation, Liam brought my laptop to me, placing it on the coffee table like a surgeon laying out his tools before a critical operation. He sat beside me, not speaking, just offering his silent, unwavering support. The screen cast a pale blue light on our faces, the only light in the room. This felt monumental, a point of no return. For a moment, my hand hovered over the trackpad, a tremor of doubt running through me. I was about to dismantle a system I had spent nearly a decade building, a system of support that, however toxic, was the foundation of my relationship with my family. Then the image of my son Noah's face, his eyes fixed on the floor as he held that piece of bread, flashed in my mind. The doubt vanished, replaced by a cold, surgical precision. I took a deep breath and logged into our joint bank account. The first thing I did was run a search isolating every transfer, every payment, every withdrawal that had gone to my parents and sister over the past 8 years. The software spun for a moment before a number materialized on the screen, stark and unforgiving. $127,452. I stared at it, feeling the air leave my lungs. It was a number so large, so concrete, it seemed impossible. It was a down payment on a house, a college fund for both my children, a lifetime of security, and I had given it all away piece by piece in the name of a love that was never truly returned. Liam let out a low whistle beside me. I knew it was bad live, he murmured. But I never imagined... Neither did I whispered. Seeing the grand total was the final confirmation I needed. This wasn't help. It was a hemorrhage. My fingers began to move a steady rhythmic dance on the keyboard. The montage of my betrayal, or perhaps my liberation, began. First, the big one, my parents' mortgage. I pulled up the automatic payment schedule, the one I had set up 5 years ago when my dad's business had started to fail. I remembered the day he'd asked, his voice thick with shame, promising it was only temporary. I saw the bank's logo, the address of the house I grew up in, the home where my children were just taught they were worth less than their cousins. My finger hovered over the cancel button. A memory surfaced, a happy one, of my dad teaching me to ride a bike in that home's backyard. I squeezed my eyes shut, pushing it away. I replaced it with the image of him nodding in agreement when Chloe said my sons needed to learn their place. I clicked the mouse. The sound was unnaturally loud in the silent room. A pop-up window asked, "Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled payment?" I clicked, "Confirm." The payment line item turned gray, a single word appearing next to it. Canceled. Next, Chloe's car, the one she had called me about just an hour ago. I found the recurring payment to the auto finance company. I remembered the day she got it, how she'd hugged me, calling me the best sister in the world. I also remembered how she'd used that same car to drive her kids to the park while leaving mine behind because she said her car was too nice for muddy shoes. The hypocrisy burned. I clicked the mouse again. Confirm. Canceled. Then came the smaller, insidious drains, the secondary credit card I had foolishly taken out under my name for my mom to use for groceries and emergencies. I logged into the credit card portal and pulled up the most recent statement. It was filled with charges for salon visits, new clothes, and expensive lunches with her friends. There wasn't a single grocery bill on it. I navigated to the account settings. Freeze card. I clicked it. Report card as lost or stolen. I clicked that too for good measure. A new card would be sent to my address, not hers. Deactivated. Finally, the monthly allowance. The $1,000 I sent to Chloe's account on the first of every month, a little something to help with the kids that she had come to expect as her birthright. It was the easiest of all, a simple direct deposit. I found the transaction and hit the delete button. The system didn't even ask for confirmation. It just vanished, as if it had never existed. Terminated. When it was all done, I leaned back against the couch, my body feeling strangely light. Every financial tie that bound me to their dysfunction was severed. Every lifeline I had extended had been pulled back. I had built a wall of money around them to protect them from the consequences of their own choices, and I had just dismantled it brick by brick. The safety net was gone. They were on their own now, left with nothing but the truth of their actions. The storm was coming. I knew it. But for the first time, I felt ready for the rain. I woke up the next morning feeling like I hadn't slept at all. A strange mixture of dread and liberation churned in my stomach. The house was quiet, filled with the soft morning light that I usually loved. I went through the motions of a normal day, making pancakes for Noah and Leo, packing their lunches for school, the familiar routine of flimsy shield against the chaos I knew was about to erupt. Every time my phone buzzed with a notification, my heart would leap into my throat. But they were just work emails, news alerts, the mundane remnants of a life that no longer felt like mine. Liam had already left for work, but not before giving me a long hug at the door, whispering, "Stay strong. We're doing the right thing." I held on to those words like a lifeline. I was just finishing the breakfast dishes when the phone rang, the caller ID flashing a name that made my blood run cold. Dad. The storm had arrived. I let it ring 3 times, taking a deep, steadying breath before I answered. I walked over to the window overlooking the backyard where Noah and Leo were chasing a soccer ball, their laughter a precious, innocent sound. This is why I reminded myself, this is for them. I swiped to answer. "Hi, Dad," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Liv, thank God I reached you." Richard's voice was frantic, laced with a confusion that sounded genuine. "Listen, something's wrong with the bank. They just sent your mother and me an alert. The mortgage payment was declined. They must have had some kind of system glitch. Can you call them and sort it out?" You know, your mother gets so worried about these things. I watched Noah score a pretend goal, his arms raised in triumph. "There's no mistake, Dad," I said quietly. I canceled the payment. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could hear his mind working, trying to process what I had just said, trying to fit it into the world he understood, a world where I was his reliable, dutiful daughter. "What? What do you mean you canceled it?" "That's not funny, Olivia. This is the mortgage. It's serious. I know it's serious," I replied, my gaze still fixed on my sons. "That's why I'm not paying it anymore." "Why?" The word was a choked whisper. The confusion was rapidly being replaced by a dawning horror. "What on earth is going on? Did something happen? Are you and Liam in some kind of trouble? Do you need money?" The irony of his question was so thick I could have choked on it. After all these years, his first assumption wasn't that he had done something wrong, but that I was the one in trouble. "No, Dad," I said, my voice hardening slightly. "We're fine. But the arrangement we had is over. The financial support is over. But why?" he stammered again, and now I could hear the panic creeping in. "This is our house, Liv. Your mother and I could lose our home. After everything we've done for you, how could you do this to us? What did we do to deserve this?" The little girl inside me, the one who had always wanted his approval, wanted to crumble. She wanted to apologize, to fix it, to make his panic go away. But the mother standing at the window held her ground. "You should ask Mom and Chloe that question," I said, my voice dropping to an icy calm. "Ask them what they think you did to deserve this. Ask them about the spaghetti and the bread and the things they said about my sons when they thought I wasn't listening." I could hear my mom's voice in the background now asking what was wrong. Richard was trying to shush her. "This is about last night," he said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You're threatening to make your parents homeless over a misunderstanding about dinner. Olivia, that's insane. Has Liam been putting these ideas in your head? Is he trying to turn you against your own family?" The blame shift. It was a classic move one I had seen 1,000 times. When in doubt, blame the outsider, the husband. "Liam has nothing to do with this," I stated flatly. "This was my decision. And it's final." "I have to go, Dad." Before he could argue, I ended the call. My hand was shaking. That was harder than I could have ever imagined. But I had survived it. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass of the window, my breath fogging the pain. My phone immediately began to ring again, but I ignored it. I knew he would need to tell Chloe, and I knew what was coming next. It didn't take long. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone lit up with Chloe's name. This time, there would be no confusion, no pleading. This would be pure rage. I answered on the first ring, ready for the onslaught. "You!" She shrieked, her voice so loud and distorted with fury that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "What did you do?" "I just got a call from the finance company. They said the payment was canceled, and they're going to repossess my car if I don't pay the full amount in 10 days. Are you trying to ruin my life?" I said nothing. I just listened to her breathe, her ragged, angry gasps filling the silence. "Are you even listening to me?" she screamed. "I need my car, Olivia. I need it to get to work. I need it to take my kids to school." How could you be so selfish after everything I've done for you? Who do you think watched the boys all those times you and Liam wanted a date night? Who do you think helped you plan your wedding? Her version of history was so warped, so completely self-serving, it was almost laughable. The few times she had watched my sons had been followed by a list of things she needed me to buy for her. She had helped with the wedding by insisting on a more expensive venue that I ended up paying for. She had a talent for rewriting the past to cast herself as a martyr. "I'm not paying for it anymore, Chloe," I said simply, my voice devoid of emotion. Why, she spat. "Because I told you your kids were easy. Because I didn't roll out the red carpet for them. My God, Liv, get over yourself. Not everything is about you and your perfect little life. Some of us are actually struggling out here, and all you've ever done is look down on us from your high horse. You think you're so much better than us, don't you?" Her words were meant to hurt, to cut me down, to trigger my old insecurities. And a year ago, they would have worked. I would have been a mess of apologies and frantic promises to fix everything. But not anymore. Something fundamental had broken inside me last night, and in its place was a wall of calm, impenetrable steel. I had been paying for their love and respect my whole life, and I had never received either. The payments were simply stopping. "I have to go, Chloe," I said, echoing the words I had said to my father. "Don't you dare hang up on me," she shrieked. "You fix this. You call them and you fix this right now. Olivia, I am your sister. You owe me." The line went dead as I ended the call. I stood in the silence of my kitchen, the echoes of her rage still ringing in my ears. The first wave of their panic had crashed against me, and I was still standing. They were shocked. They were furious. But they still didn't understand. They thought this was a negotiation. They had no idea that it was already over. The days that followed the initial wave of panic were eerily quiet. My phone, which had been a source of constant anxiety, fell silent. There were no more angry calls, no pleading texts, no emails filled with guilt and accusations. The silence was a vacuum, a void that felt more menacing than their rage. It was the calm before a hurricane, the deep breath a predator takes before it strikes. I knew my family. I knew their capacity for drama and manipulation. This quiet wasn't acceptance. It was strategy. They were regrouping, planning their next assault, and I spent every waking moment bracing for it. I found myself checking my phone constantly, my shoulders perpetually tense, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on a Thursday afternoon while I was in the middle of a video conference for work. My phone set to silent began vibrating violently on my desk. The screen lit up with a picture of my mother. A wave of pure dread washed over me. I quickly excused myself from the meeting, my heart hammering against my ribs, and stepped into the hallway to take the call. The sound that met me on the other end was not a voice. It was a raw, theatrical sob, a performance of grief so over the top it was almost unbelievable. "Olivia, my mother," Karen wailed, her voice cracking with manufactured panic. "Oh my God, Olivia, it's your father, Mom. What's wrong? What's happened?" I asked, my own voice tight with adrenaline, the carefully constructed walls of my resolve beginning to tremble. "He's on the floor," she gasped between sobs. He was clutching his chest. He said he couldn't breathe. I think it's his heart. Oh, Olivia, it's all the stress. It's all this fighting. It's been too much for him. What have you done?" The accusation expertly woven into her panic was like a poisoned dart. For a terrifying second, my world tilted on its axis. What if she was right? What if the stress of losing the house, the shame, the fear had actually triggered a heart attack? A vision of my father lying helpless on the floor flashed in my mind. The guilt was instantaneous and suffocating, a lead weight in my stomach. This was my worst fear realized. "Mom, listen to me," I said, trying to force a calm I did not feel into my voice. "You need to hang up and call 911. Right now." "I can't," she shrieked, her voice rising in pitch. "I can't. They'll ask for our insurance information, our credit card. We don't have insurance anymore, you know that. You canceled the payments. They won't take him without payment. I don't have any money, Olivia. You have to help us. You're the only one who can fix this. Please just transfer the money for the hospital bills. Please, baby. Your father is dying." And there it was, the tell. In the midst of a supposed life-or-death emergency, her mind was on money. The logic was flawed, a desperate, clumsy lie. Hospitals in the United States are legally required to treat patients in an emergency regardless of their ability to pay. She knew that, I knew that. But she was counting on my panic, my fear, and my lifelong conditioning as her daughter to override my logic. She was weaponizing my love for my father against me. The internal battle was deafening. The daughter in me was screaming, "What if you're wrong? What if this is the one time she's telling the truth? If he dies, it will be your fault. You will never forgive yourself." It was a powerful primal fear, the fear of losing a parent compounded by the horrifying possibility that I would be the cause. My hand was shaking so badly, I had to grip the phone with both hands. I felt sweat trickle down my back. My mind was racing, replaying every moment of the past week, searching for a clue, a sign that would tell me what was real and what was a performance. Then I saw it again. The image that had become my anchor in this storm. My sons on the cold kitchen floor. Their small, slumped shoulders. Their silent acceptance of being treated as less than. I thought of the woman who had watched that happen. The woman who had engineered that quiet humiliation. And I had my answer. A person who could do that to her own grandchildren was capable of anything. She was capable of this. The chaos in my mind suddenly went still. The panic receded, replaced by an anger so cold and so pure, it felt like ice solidifying in my veins. This was not a cry for help. It was a hostage negotiation. And my father's life was the supposed ransom. "Listen to me very carefully, Mom," I said, and my voice was unrecognizable, stripped of all warmth, all fear. It was the voice of a stranger. "If Dad is having a medical emergency, you will hang up this phone right now and you will dial 911. That is the only correct course of action. If you do not, then I will know this is a lie. But the money..." She started, her sob catching in her throat. "This has nothing to do with money," I cut her off. "This is about my father's life. If you care about him, you will call for help. Goodbye, Mom." I ended the call before she could respond. My heart was still pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. The doubt was a poisonous whisper in the back of my mind. What if I'm wrong? I couldn't stand it. I had to know. My fingers, still trembling, fumbled as I searched for the number of the main hospital nearest my parents' home. I found it and dialed, my breath held tight in my chest. A calm, professional voice answered, "City General Hospital. How can I help you?" "Hi," I said, my voice cracking slightly. I need to check if a patient was just admitted to your emergency room. His name is Richard Miller." I could hear the gentle click of a keyboard on the other end. It was the longest 10 seconds of my life. Every terrible possibility ran through my head. "Miller, you said, Richard Miller?" the receptionist asked. "Yes, that's right." Another few seconds of typing. "No, ma'am," she said, her voice polite and certain. "We have no patient by that name currently in our system, not in the ER or as a direct admission. Would you like me to check any other local hospitals for you?" The line went quiet as I struggled to find my voice. It wasn't relief that washed over me. It was a chilling, profound emptiness. The final fragile thread of hope I had held for my family, the tiny, naive belief that there was a line they would not cross, had just been vaporized. They would lie about anything. They would use anything. They would even use the specter of my father's death as a tool for financial extortion. "No," I finally managed to say, my voice a hollow echo of itself. "That won't be necessary. Thank you for your time." I hung up the phone and leaned against the wall, the cool plaster a stark contrast to the burning rage and sorrow that filled me. The love I had felt for my mother, already battered and bruised, died in that moment. It was over, all of it. They hadn't just crossed a line. They had proven to me that for them, no line even existed. After the chilling revelation of the fake heart attack, I had thought, perhaps naively, that my family had finally exhausted their arsenal of manipulation. I believed that having stooped to such a despicable low and failed, they would retreat defeated. For nearly a week, a fragile peace settled over my life. The silence on my phone was no longer menacing. It felt like a reprieve, a chance to breathe. I focused on my work, poured my energy into my sons, and started to believe that the worst was truly over. I allowed myself to unclench, to lower my guard. It was a mistake I would not make again. My office is my sanctuary. It's an open concept design firm, a place of creativity, collaboration, and light. High ceilings, glass walls, the gentle hum of focused energy. It's a world away from the suffocating drama of my family, a space where I am judged on my talent and my work ethic, not by my utility as a financial resource. I was in the middle of a brainstorming session with my team, laughing at a joke my colleague Mark had made, feeling a sense of normalcy I hadn't felt in weeks. That's when the call came from the front desk. Olivia Sarah, our receptionist, whispered, her voice tight with stress. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but your sister is here. Chloe, she's very upset. She's demanding to see you and she refuses to wait in the lobby." A block of ice formed in the pit of my stomach. "Chloe, here, the one place I thought was safe." "Tell her I'm in a meeting, Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Tell her I'll call her later." I tried that. Sarah whispered back frantically. "She's not listening. She's yelling. Olivia, I think you need to come down here." But it was too late. Before I could respond, I heard a commotion from the direction of the lobby. The glass doors to our main workspace burst open, and there stood Chloe, a vision of calculated chaos. Her hair was a mess, her mascara was intentionally smudged beneath her red, swollen eyes, and she was clutching a crumpled tissue in her hand. She looked like the star of a tragedy, and she had just found her stage. Every head in the office turned. The productive hum ceased, replaced by a stunned, absolute silence. Chloe scanned the room, her eyes locking onto mine with the precision of a heat-seeking missile. Then she let out a gut-wrenching sob that echoed through the cavernous space. "Olivia," she wailed, taking a few stumbling steps forward, ensuring she had everyone's undivided attention. "Oh, Olivia, how could you?" My colleagues stared, their faces a mixture of shock and pity. I remained frozen at my desk, my blood turning to ice. This was it. The final desperate scorched earth assault. She wasn't here to reason with me. She was here to destroy me. She began to pace back and forth in the center of the office, her voice rising with every word, a sermon of suffering directed at my peers. "Do all of you know what a wonderful sister I have?" she asked the silent room, a bitter, sarcastic edge to her voice. "Do you see her sitting here in her expensive chair in this beautiful building? She seems so nice, doesn't she? So put together. But let me tell you who she really is. She's the woman who let her own parents get an eviction notice. She's the woman who watches her family crumble while she counts her money." My face burned with humiliation. I could feel every eye on me, every colleague, my boss, the interns. They were all watching this horrifying spectacle unfold. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. "Our father almost died last week," she shrieked, the lie even more venomous now that it was being told to a room full of strangers. "He had a heart attack from the stress she caused. And when our mother called her begging for help, do you know what she did? She hung up. She left him to die because she's too proud, too cold to even care." A wave of murmurs rippled through the office. I saw looks of pity on some faces, looks of disgust on others. They were all directed at me. Chloe was a brilliant performer. She was weaving a narrative so compelling, so full of pain and betrayal, that it was impossible not to be drawn in. She cut us all off. Chloe continued, tears streaming down her face now. Our mother who raised her, our father who worked his fingers to the bone for her, me, her sister, who was always there for her. She's letting them repossess my car, my only way to get my kids to school. Why? Because of a stupid argument about dinner. Because she thinks she's better than us. She's rich and successful, so she thinks she has the right to throw us away like we're garbage. Every word was a twisting knife. Every lie was a splash of acid on my reputation. She was painting me as a cruel, elitist monster, a heartless villain who had abandoned her salt-of-the-earth family. Part of me, the old Olivia, wanted to scream, to defend myself, to tell them the truth about the kitchen floor, the years of financial exploitation, the fake heart attack. But I knew it would be useless. Arguing with a hysteric only makes you look hysterical yourself. In the court of public opinion, the one who cries the loudest often wins. But as I sat there enduring this public execution, a strange thing happened. The burning humiliation began to fade, replaced by a profound and chilling calm. The part of me that cared what they thought, the part that craved their approval, simply died. I looked at my sister, at her tear-stained, contorted face, and I didn't feel anger. I felt a deep, sorrowful pity. This is what she was reduced to, a desperate, pathetic performance, because it was the only tool she had left. She had never learned to build, only to take. She had never learned to be responsible, only to demand. And now, with her supply line cut off, she was imploding, and she wanted to take me down with her. I finally stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate. The office fell into an even deeper silence, everyone waiting to see what I would do. Chloe's tirade faltered for a moment as she watched me approach, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought I was coming to surrender, to beg her to stop, to promise her the money. I walked calmly across the office, my footsteps echoing on the polished concrete floor. I stopped a few feet in front of her. Her breathing was heavy, ragged from her performance. "Please, Liv," she whimpered, reaching out to grab my arm, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper meant only for me. "Just fix it. Please, I'm begging you. I'll do anything. Just make it go back to the way it was." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then I looked up and met her eyes. And in my gaze, she didn't see the sister she knew. She didn't see the guilt, the weakness, the easy target she had manipulated for years. She saw a stranger, someone cold and clear and unbreakable. I didn't say a word to her. I gently removed her hand from my arm, turned my back on her, and walked to my desk. I picked up my phone. Chloe watched me, her face a mask of confusion, her triumph dissolving into uncertainty. I dialed the 3-digit extension for building security. "Hello, security," I said, my voice perfectly level, carrying through the silent office. "This is Olivia Miller in the design department on the 3rd floor. We have an unauthorized individual in our workspace. She is causing a disturbance and has refused to leave. Please send someone to escort her from the building immediately." A collective gasp went through the room. Chloe's face crumpled. The finality in my voice, the absolute lack of emotion, was the one thing she had not prepared for. The fight went out of her, replaced by a raw, genuine shock. She had played her last card, and it had not only failed, it had backfired spectacularly. 2 security guards arrived in less than a minute. They were professional, discreet, but firm. Chloe didn't resist. She just stood there looking at me with wide, uncomprehending eyes as they gently guided her towards the exit. The performance was over. All that was left was the pathetic, broken reality. As they led her away, I turned to face my boss and my stunned colleagues. The silence was deafening. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me, judging me, questioning me. But for the first time, I didn't care. I sincerely apologize for that disruption, I said, my voice clear and strong. It is a private family matter that I have been dealing with. I have taken the necessary steps to ensure it will not happen again. And with that, I sat down at my desk, pulled my keyboard closer, and went back to work. The war was over. I had lost a sister and perhaps a family, but in the ruins of that relationship, I had finally, truly found myself. After the spectacle at my office, the world did not end. My boss, a shrewd and perceptive woman named Eleanor, called me into her office the next morning. I walked in expecting a reprimand, a lecture on professionalism, perhaps even a warning. Instead, she closed the door, offered me a cup of coffee, and said, "I don't know what your family is going through, Olivia, and it's none of my business. But the way you handled yourself yesterday showed more grace and strength than I've seen in a long time. Take the rest of the day off if you need it. We've got your back here." I was so taken aback by her kindness that I almost broke down, but I managed a grateful thank you and went back to my desk, feeling a sense of stability I hadn't realized I was missing. My professional world, the one I had built for myself, was secure. The silence that followed from my family was different this time. It wasn't the tense, strategic silence of them plotting their next move. It was the hollow, echoing silence of utter defeat. Days turned into a week, then 2. My phone remained quiet. No angry texts, no manipulative voicemails, no public ambushes. It was as if, after that final desperate performance, they had finally run out of energy, their rage and entitlement burning out like a dying star, leaving nothing but cold, empty space. A part of me was relieved, breathing freely for the first time in what felt like an eternity. But another deeper part of me felt a phantom ache, a mourning for the family that I once loved, or at least the idea of the family I thought I had. About 3 weeks after the incident at my office, a morbid curiosity I couldn't quite explain led me to take a different route home from work. It was a longer route, one that would take me down the familiar tree-lined street where I had grown up. I told myself I just wanted to see, to know. As I turned the corner, I slowed the car, my heart beginning to beat a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. And then I saw it. It was jarring, a slash of bright garish red against the familiar white siding of the house. A for sale sign hammered into the center of the lawn where my father had taught me how to throw a baseball. I pulled the car over to the curb and just stared. The sight didn't bring me the vindictive pleasure I might have once imagined. There was no triumph, no feeling of victory. There was only a profound and hollow sadness. My mind was flooded with a lifetime of memories unbidden and sharp. Birthday parties in the backyard, the smell of my mom's turkey on Thanksgiving, the pencil mark on the kitchen door frame that tracked my height year after year. That house wasn't just a building, it was the entire archive of my childhood, and now it was being sold a casualty of the war I had been forced to declare. I closed my eyes and the happy memories were immediately replaced by the one that mattered most. My sons on the cold linoleum floor, the dry bread, the quiet shame in their eyes. This house, for all its happy memories, had also become the place where my children were taught they were second best. The sale of this house wasn't a punishment. It was a consequence. It was the painful, necessary amputation of a part of my life that had become toxic, a part that threatened the future of the family I was building now, with Liam, Noah, and Leo. I put the car in drive and pulled away, not looking back. A week later, I saw Chloe. It was purely by chance. I was stopped at a red light on a busy downtown street when I saw her standing at a bus stop. I almost didn't recognize her at first. The woman from my office, the one who had been a whirlwind of theatrical rage and tears, was gone. In her place was a stranger who looked deflated, tired, and worn down by the abrasive reality of a life without a safety net. Her expensive clothes were replaced with a simple generic work uniform. Her perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wasn't looking around, wasn't trying to catch anyone's eye. She was just staring down at her phone, her shoulders slumped, the very picture of exhaustion. Her car, her symbol of status that I had paid for, was gone. A flicker of pity went through me, but it was distant, detached. This wasn't a reality I had forced upon her. This was the life she had built for herself, a life propped up by my money and her own sense of entitlement. Without my financial support, her carefully constructed world had collapsed, leaving only this. The woman waiting for the bus was the real Chloe, the one who had been there all along, hidden beneath layers of my misplaced generosity. The light turned green, and I drove on feeling not anger, not sadness, but a final, quiet sense of closure. The last piece of the collapse came to me through a brief, accidental glimpse. I was driving the boys to a friend's birthday party in my old neighborhood. As we passed my parents' old street, now dotted with other for-sale signs, I saw my mother. The moving truck was parked in the driveway, its back ramped down like a gaping mouth. And through the large picture window, I saw my mom, Karen, sitting alone at the dining room table. The room around her was filled with brown cardboard boxes, a chaotic landscape of a life being dismantled. She wasn't packing. She wasn't directing the movers. She was just sitting there staring at her hands, looking smaller and more lost than I had ever seen her. The vibrant, noisy heart of our family, the kitchen where she had presided over so many gatherings, was now a sterile, sad space of transition. That single image crystallized everything for me. The loud, dramatic implosion I had braced myself for had never happened. Instead, their world had ended, not with a bang, but with a whisper. Their comfortable existence, so thoroughly subsidized by my income, had been a beautiful, fragile bubble. And when I finally stopped blowing air into it, it didn't explode. It simply quietly sagged and vanished, leaving them to breathe the unfiltered air of reality for the first time in years. The silence from them wasn't a strategy anymore. It was the sound of them finally being forced to confront the life they had made for themselves without a scapegoat to blame or a safety net to catch them. Several more weeks passed in a state of quiet normalcy. The dramatic, chaotic rhythm that had defined my life for so long had been replaced by a peaceful, predictable pace. The evenings were filled with homework and bedtime stories, the weekends with soccer games and trips to the park. Liam and I were reconnecting, the constant stress of my family's demands no longer a toxic presence in our marriage. We were building a new life, a stronger one forged in the fire of the conflict we had endured together. I had started to believe that the door to my past was finally firmly closed. I had accepted that the family I was born into was gone, and I was making peace with that. Then one Tuesday evening, as I was helping Leo build a particularly ambitious Lego tower, the doorbell rang. The sound was so unexpected it made me jump. We weren't expecting anyone. Liam was upstairs giving Noah his bath. I felt an immediate familiar clenching in my stomach, the old instinct of bracing for impact. I walked to the front door, my heart beating a little too fast, and peered through the peephole. My breath caught in my throat. Standing on my porch, illuminated by the soft yellow light, was my father. He looked nothing like the frantic, angry man who had yelled at me over the phone weeks ago. And he looked nothing like the proud, imposing patriarch I had known my whole life. The man standing on my doorstep looked diminished. He was smaller than I remembered, his shoulders slumped inside a jacket that seemed too big for him. His face was etched with lines of exhaustion and a deep, profound weariness that went beyond simple fatigue. He wasn't looking at the door. He was staring down at his own worn-out shoes as if he couldn't muster the strength to look up. He wasn't a threat. He was just a sad old man. A war raged inside me. A part of me, the part that had been so deeply wounded, wanted to keep the door locked, to pretend I wasn't home. But the daughter who had once idolized this man, the one who still remembered him teaching her how to ride her bike, felt a painful tug of sympathy. I took a deep breath, turned the deadbolt, and opened the door. He looked up startled, as if he hadn't actually expected me to answer. His eyes, when they met mine, were filled not with anger but with a deep, bottomless well of shame. "Olivia," he said, his voice raspy, barely a whisper. I didn't invite him in. I stood in the doorway, my arms crossed over my chest, a human barrier between my new peaceful life and the man who represented the old chaotic one. "Dad," I said, my tone flat, guarded. "What are you doing here?" He seemed to shrink a little under my cold gaze. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He looked like a child who had been called to the principal's office. I know I have no right to be here," he began, his eyes darting from my face to the floor. "And I know you have every reason to slam the door in my face. I couldn't go another day without—" His voice trailed off, and he seemed to struggle to find the right words. My suspicion was a shield hard and impenetrable. I had been fooled before. "If you're here for money, you've wasted a trip," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. He flinched, but then he shook his head, a gesture of weary denial. "No," he said finally, looking me straight in the eye. For the first time, I saw not just shame, but a flicker of his old resolve. "No, I'm not here for money, Liv. I will never ask you for another dime as long as I live. That's not why I'm here." My arms remained crossed, but a tiny crack appeared in my armor of suspicion. "Then why are you here?" He took a shaky breath, the sound loud in the quiet evening air. "I'm here to apologize," he said, the words coming out in a rush, as if he was afraid he would lose his nerve. "But not just to you." He swallowed hard, his gaze flickering past me into the warm light of my home. "I'm here to apologize to the boys, to Noah and Leo." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Of all the things I had expected, this was not one of them. An apology to the boys. It was an admission of the true crime, the one that went beyond money, beyond entitlement. It was an acknowledgement of the deepest, most unforgivable wound. The ice in my veins, the cold resolve that had protected me for weeks, began to melt, and the pain and sorrow I had suppressed for so long rushed into the void. My eyes welled up with tears I refused to let fall. "I was a coward, Olivia," he continued, his voice cracking. "I stood in that kitchen, and I saw what was happening. I saw how your mother and your sister were treating my grandsons. I saw the look on their faces, and I didn't say a word. I just stood there and let it happen. I let them be hurt in my own home." He looked down at his hands as if he couldn't stand the sight of them. A grandfather is supposed to protect his family. He's supposed to be a safe place. And I wasn't. I failed them. I failed you. I was so caught up in the money and the fear of losing our comfortable life that I lost sight of what actually mattered. I let my pride and my weakness turn me into someone I don't even recognize. He finally looked up, and his eyes were swimming with unshed tears. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "God knows I don't deserve it. But I can't live with myself knowing that my grandsons might grow up thinking their own grandfather thinks they are less than. They are not less than. They are perfect. And I need to tell them I'm sorry." The sincerity was overwhelming. It was raw and painful and real. This wasn't a performance. This was a man who had been stripped of everything, his home, his pride, his financial security, and had been forced to finally look at himself in the mirror and face the person he had become. This was a man broken, but in that brokenness, he had found a piece of the father I had missed for so long. Slowly, deliberately, I uncrossed my arms. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. It was an act of surrender, an act of grace, an act of hope. "They're inside," I said, my voice soft. I stepped back, opening the door wider. It was an invitation, a small tentative bridge across the vast canyon of hurt that separated us. He wiped his eyes and nodded, stepping hesitantly across the threshold of my home for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. Leo came running into the hallway, his Lego creation held high. He stopped when he saw my father, his expression curious. Richard knelt down, his knees cracking so that he was at eye level with his 5-year-old grandson. "Hello, Leo," he said, his voice gentle. "Grandpa made a very big mistake. I let you and your brother be treated in a way that was not kind and not fair, and I am so sorry. It will never ever happen again, I promise." Leo just stared for a moment, then he held up his Lego tower. "Look what I made," he said. And in that simple, innocent gesture, there was a forgiveness my father had not yet earned, but that my son had freely given. A door hadn't just been opened. A new one was beginning to be built. My father's apology was not a magic wand. It didn't instantly erase years of pain or magically repair the shattered trust between us. But it was a start. It was a foundation, the first solid piece of ground in a landscape that had been nothing but rubble. Over the next few months, we began the slow, awkward, and painful process of building something new. We met in neutral spaces like quiet coffee shops or parks, places that weren't haunted by the ghosts of our past. During one of these meetings, my mother finally spoke her truth, her words clumsy and heavy, with things left unsaid for too long. She told me, using a phrase I was sure she had learned from a therapist, that she had been blinded by an unconscious bias. She admitted she had favored Chloe's children because they looked like her, and that it was easier than confronting her own complicated feelings about my mixed-race family. She also admitted her deep-seated fear of financial instability, a fear that had turned her into someone who valued security over integrity, and her daughter's bank account over her daughter's well-being. Chloe's apology was even harder, choked with a resentment that was slowly giving way to a grudging self-awareness. She admitted she had always been jealous of me, of my career, my marriage, my life, that seemed so much easier than hers. Taking my money had started as a need, but it had morphed into a right, a way for her to feel like she was getting her fair share of a success she felt she was also owed. They both confirmed they were attending family counseling separately and together. It wasn't a cure, but it was a commitment. I listened to all of this, not with the anger I once had, but with a quiet, sad understanding. I knew then that I had to be clear about the future. "I want you in our lives," I told them, my voice steady and firm, "and I want you in my children's lives. But the old way is over. I will not be your financial safety net ever again." I then laid out my new terms. I told them I was setting up a formal education fund, a 529 plan for all 4 of my nieces and nephews, Noah, Leo, Mason, and Sophia. I would contribute to it on their birthdays and holidays. The money would be legally protected for their schooling and nothing else. It was an act of love for the children, all of them, but it was not a handout. It was a hand up for the next generation. For them, for the adults, my support would be emotional, not financial. They would have to stand on their own 2 feet. For the first time, they didn't argue. They just nodded and accepted. It was the beginning of a new contract, one based not on dependency, but on a fragile, hard-won respect. Months later, as I was driving my own family home after a small, quiet dinner at my parents' new, much smaller apartment, a sense of peace settled over me. In the back seat, Noah, who had been quiet for a while, piped up. "Mom," he asked, his voice clear and thoughtful, "are Grandma and Grandpa different now?" I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, my heart catching in my throat. "What do you think, sweetheart?" He was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "I think they're trying to be," he said finally. "Grandpa asked me all about my science project, and he actually listened when I explained it. And Grandma showed me how to make her special cookies." He paused. "It was good, like maybe they really want to know us now, not just see us." From the passenger seat, Liam reached over and took my hand, his thumb gently rubbing my knuckles. He didn't have to say anything. We had done it. We had weathered the storm and come out the other side. I looked at my sons in the mirror, at their happy, safe faces, and then I looked at the man beside me, my partner in everything. A genuine, unburdened smile spread across my face. The road ahead wouldn't be perfect, but it was our road, and for the first time it was clear. It was a future built not on obligation, but on an honest, intentional, and fiercely protected love. True family is built on mutual respect, not financial obligation. Withdrawing support isn't an act of cruelty, but one of tough love, a necessary catalyst for change. It forces everyone to confront the toxic dynamic, creating space for a healthier, more authentic relationship to finally begin.